So the first day of the UFC Fan Expo, I mainly spent queuing in the morning and in the afternoon for all the autographs, and then I attended the weigh-ins in the afternoon. In the evening, I went into central London to meet my friend called Angela Rayner. Now Angela, I know because she used to be in the lay community at the same time as me. I had in fact met her before when I went back down for UFC 85, and I met her when she came up to Harrogate sometime before that. So I've seen her quite a bit in the last sort of 5 years, but it was still nice to meet up with her. We decided that we would also meet somebody called Joe Watson, who was somebody else in the lay community. Now I hadn't seen him since my final day in London. He in fact accompanied me to Victoria Coach Station to see me off the very last day that I was there, which was the last day of August in 2005. So it was lovely to see him again, because it had been a full 5 years since I'd seen him, and we all went out for a meal. The weather on that particular day was a bit rainy, a bit drizzly in the evening. We eventually settled down at some sort of Turkish place, I think. We met at the Founder's Arms, but decided that wasn't the right place to go to eat on the South Bank. And then we sort of wandered along, and I saw the mess that they're making across Blackfriars Bridge, and the whole of the South Bank, in fact. And then we went to Gabriel's Wharf, but they had closed the creperie that we wanted to go to. So then we went under the rail bridge to the Turkish place there. The service at that Turkish place was dreadful. When we got in, they said, you only have an hour and a quarter, then you must be out. We sat down, and then they didn't come and collect our order for about sort of half an hour. It was all right though. The food was fantastic. The food was well worth it, and the prices were reasonable, but the service was pretty poor. So when they gave us a service charge of about £7, we sort of turned around and said, well no, we're not going to pay that much in service, because the service was the bit that was lacking. Having said that, I enjoyed it. It was a fantastic evening out. The second day of the Fan Expo was the day of the fights as well. So I got there quite early again, and I did autographs. I got my autographs in the morning only because I happened to be passing at the time when they were going to be coming out, and I saw that, you know, some people didn't have very many people waiting. My main goal for the second day's autograph was in the afternoon for Frankie Edgar. Other than that, I didn't really, it wasn't important to me. The day before had been the real day for all the autographs, and that was the day that I managed to meet Rich Franklin. Now, I hadn't realised, in fact, that Franklin was going there. I should have known, because they do have a tendency to send him to most of the places that are not in the US for some reason. I think he's been to the one in Europe. He's certainly been to the one in Ireland. He may have even been to the UK before, I'm not sure. But there we are. So it was fun meeting him, particularly as I do actually correspond with him in emails, and he did know who I was when I sort of approached him, which was quite interesting, because I was expecting, I don't know how many people he emails, but he does a blog and he has a fair amount of interaction with fans. So the likelihood that he would, you know, remember who I was, I thought was going to be quite slim. But he did remember, which was fantastic. Then I made my way across to the dome itself for the event. I got there quite early enough to have something to eat in the dome, and then we queued. I was quite early. I decided at half 3 I was going to join the queue for the doors that opened at 4. We went in, which was fine. I was on the top level, that's the 4th level, that's quite high up, and we went all the way up in the escalators. The doors weren't immediately open to the auditorium itself. I think the doors to the auditorium probably didn't open for a further half an hour. I think it was probably about 4:30. but that was fine because the bars and the stuff outside the auditorium were open. We went in, and the first thing that struck me was how high up the gods, so to speak, of this particular auditorium are. It's not just the fact that you are up above the auditorium, so high up that you're above the lighting rig, you're above the sound rig, and you can look down on them, including the little guy who was wandering across, suspended above, I don't know, probably 40 feet above the octagon in the sound and lighting rig that was gently swaying backwards and forwards like that above the whole auditorium. You could see him quite clearly. In fact, I noticed that he took extreme interest in one of the fights, and I can't remember, it was quite late. I think it was the John Hathaway fight. I think I could see the little light on his camera as he was recording over the edge, and I was thinking, for goodness sake, don't drop that camera. It wasn't just the height, it was also the steepness. You know, the MEN, the Manchester Evening News auditorium, goes probably higher, but it's less steep. And because it's less steep, you feel a little safer. We had a gap of about that big, and I'm not joking, to walk along to get to our seats. I was on the very, very top row. And when you sat down, you felt like you were on one of those, I felt like I was back at the Pleasure Beach in Blackpool on one of those rides. You got to the top of one of the Big Dippers, and then you just stopped. So you never actually went hurtling down the other side. You just stopped at that point. And that's how it felt for the first good half an hour before the fight actually started. I do have mild vertigo, and I was gripping the edge of my seat because it was that frightening. And everybody I know sat on that row and the row in front mentioned it when they sat down. My goodness, they said, this is very high up, and it doesn't look safe. It doesn't look like you, it looks like if you stand up or you get animated, you'd fall off. And if you fall off, it looks like you'd go hurtling all the way down because it's so steep. And consequently, if you wanted to climb up and down the stairs, it's quite a task, actually, because it's extremely, extremely steep. As it was, I think it was perfectly safe, and the seats were great. You had a fantastic view, even if it was the best part of probably 60 to 80 feet in the air. It was a fantastic view. You could see everything. You could see the lighting, you could see the sound, you could see... And with the big boards as well that were displaying it, if you didn't actually want to look in the octagon, and you could from our height see what was going on in the octagon, then you could watch the sort of big screens. It was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Afterwards, when we left, North Greenwich Station has crowd control, which I found quite interesting. Their idea was to keep everybody outside of the station and just let in enough to fill up the platforms, and then close the station doors again and leave people standing outside. An interesting approach. I'm sure they've done it hundreds and hundreds of times before. But I didn't notice them doing it outside UFC 85. So perhaps they've learnt from that experience, I don't know.